it's good to be here to study together. I know you guys have been working through the fruit of the Spirit and looking at different components of it. What we're going to be talking about today is the topic of patience. So hopefully everything's working on here. Clay, you can send some messages to us to let us know if we need to change anything. But talking about patience is difficult because we all know what it means. We experience it, right? We already started having some things that come up in our mind, but then how do we handle it becomes the difficult part. And then where do our prayers go? So we're going to kind of open it up a little bit. But as you think about patience, just out of curiosity, what comes to your mind? Any situations or definition that you want to give? What comes to your mind when you think about patience?
From a biblical standpoint,
I'll take any of them. Any comments you got on what patience is?
they kept asking Jesus, when he coming back?
Okay. So trying to figure out when is he coming back? You know, even after the resurrection, he spends 40 days with his apostles. And then before he ascends, they're sitting there like, okay, now, you know, when's the kingdom coming? He's like, I think you missed a few things, you know, so he begins to teach them from there.
It's so prevalent today. My mother thought he was coming back before about 2000. I mean, when she was alive.
What else comes to your mind when you think about patience? Whether biblical or an actual definition or just scenarios that we go through?
Traveling that I just mentioned.
Yeah, that's what I wrote down was traveling. I think about, if you want to test your patience, just go to a construction zone during, rush hour. So when everybody's getting off work specifically, and you will see how patient of a person you are. You know, our car, our little box that we get in, we think that's a safe place, right? But that's where we get the most frustrated. I think the worst drivers are in Montgomery, Alabama. Everyone that has come, because I work with a university there, so we get students from all over the place, and they come to Montgomery and they said, no, by far the worst drivers live in Montgomery. And I've been there for quite some time now, and I'm pretty convinced that I'm among them now when it comes to parking alone. So my wife makes fun of me. We got a van, and I can't park it as well. So I think other people have to bear patience with me. So yeah, traffic, I think about that. Couple of different things come to my mind. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say technology.
Technology, yeah.
Just like when something doesn't connect and it's supposed to. And so I'm trying to learn to say, that's what happens nowadays. And I'm going to just be patient about it. But that's what bothers me, because I feel like, okay, if this is supposed to work, then it should work.
Right. This is its job. It's what it's supposed to do. But if your dog comes in and turns off the power to your Wi-Fi, it kind of changes some things, doesn't it? So technology. Maybe you learn patience as you're waiting on a package to be delivered, and it's supposed to come on a certain day and it doesn't show up, or you sent one to someone and it doesn't show up. Maybe you think about standing in line at the grocery store ready to check out. That's where I start noticing my patience or lack thereof. And I think it's funny now that when you see somebody get cash out to pay, you're like, oh, come on, just scan a card, versus when writing checks, that used to be things like, now we got to wait on them to write a check. Now we're looking at cash. Like, if you guys would just hurry up, just, tap and go.
Hey, Billy, can I say something?
You pray for something and then you're waiting for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Along with prayer.
Don't remember, things happen in God's time, not your time.
Ooh, that's a good one. I got
Hey,
somebody.
Billy.
Yeah.
I'm online.
Okay.
I've had a cast on my leg for 4 weeks and cannot walk.
Oh, bless your heart.
So talk about patience.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been tough.
Well, we'll be praying. Hopefully that's healing well, but
It's
you gotta be
coming
patient.
off
Go back to the doctor.
day after tomorrow is coming off. So thank
All
you.
right. Well, that's very good.
Thank
And
you.
we could probably just come up with, situation after situation about how our patience is tested, or maybe it's a gauge to find out if we actually have patience or not.
Is that somebody here? Or?
Yes, that's Donna Williams. That's Donna Williams.
And I think about parenting. I could be looking to you guys for advice on this, but thinking about parenting, get little kids running around and wanting to train them, wanting to help them. I think about my 2-year-old, before we leave, hey, go put your shoes on. It's a lot easier for me just to go put his shoes on. But if I go do it, he doesn't learn, right? So I have to wait and wait. It's like he's trying to figure it out. But man, I was just going through a list in my mind of times where I have to learn patience, or where it would be good to utilize patience. So that leads me over to a definition of patience. We're going to look at it from a couple of different angles, and sorry, you have to look this way on it, so hopefully you can read. But the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. And then I looked at some other definitions and I just threw in there complaining, because let's just put that in the mix too. So being able, the capacity to accept or tolerate without getting angry or upset or complaining. What a challenge. And we're going to look at a few verses this morning that tell us that we need to be patient. And we know that God teaches us that and holds us to a high standard of it. But maybe you start thinking about these things that we go through from day to day that are troubling, delays that happen and suffering, and to remain consistent to God and what he would want us to have. So as you think about the fruit of the Spirit, and that's what you're studying in Galatians chapter 5, looking at verse 22, of course, says, but the fruit of the Spirit is, and then goes through these descriptions, and you get these 9 different fruits. But above that, we know what the works of the flesh are. So kind of this reversal. He's saying, where are you going to be? Are you showing this old life? Because the works of the flesh, we died to that. If we are Christians, right, we died to that old way of living, buried with Christ, rise up to walk in newness of life, and then we have the fruit of the Spirit. So he's like, don't go back to where you came from. All these things that really stir us up, verse 19 and working through there, those are not things that we want to go back to. That's not the kind of lifestyle that we would rather have. We want what the Spirit is telling us, these things that come from God. If we know that the Spirit is God, what would God do in this situation? What would Jesus have us to do? And so what we're narrowing ourselves down on is that word patience in the middle of this list. I said, I think about traffic and that feeling and that emotion. And I tried to find a good photo of traffic this morning, just from in Ohio, just to bring us all into context, right?
Is that here?
That one was not here. That was another location. But I was, as I was studying this and thinking through it, coming across this idea that patience is a choice. Now, what do you think about that? Patience is a choice, because in one respect, we're like, it just kind of comes on us randomly. It's like, I'm going to be impatient right now, and, taking the opposite of it. But is patience really a choice? What do you think? We choose to be patient. Or is it something that we learn? What is it exactly? What would you say? Patience is a choice. Is that accurate?
I think we have to draw on God's strength, because that's where our strength comes from. So I do think it's a choice.
Okay. You think about, no, go ahead.
I just going to say, it's not just praying for it or whatever from here on out. It's each individual encounter that you have. You have to choose.
All right. So each individual encounter, I like that, because, and I put this box up here thinking about, if patience is just this one thing that we get, and now we have resolved every situation. I don't think that's the case, because as soon as you learn patience in one scenario, what comes right behind it? Another one that you're like, well, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's figure this out. It might be a situation in your life. It might be an individual that we are having to show patience to, these scenarios. And so, is patience obtainable? Well, in some degree, yes, God is asking us to go after that and to study his word and kind of look through all these situations, try and figure out how to be more patient in our marriages, how to be more patient with our relationship with our kids, our grandkids, our friends, those people we don't even know that we come in contact with. There are countless opportunities to show patience. And that's what I like about God's commands. If you take the 2 main filters of what he tells us to do, you love God first, and you love your neighbor as yourself. You think about the Old Testament, you got 613 commandments that you could turn into a checklist, right? And we saw people attempting to do that and still failing. But you get to the New Testament, and he says to love your neighbor as yourself. Here we are at 10 o'clock in the morning. How many opportunities have we had to love our neighbor as ourselves, and how many times have we failed? And if you plug patience in there, how many opportunities do we have today to be patient, and how many times we failed at that already? I think that we notice this, but we know that patience is also part of God's plan when it comes to love. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. Somebody could read that for us. I like having people read out loud. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4. All right, go ahead.
Patience, maybe you could make one thing you could do is make it a goal. You know, it's a choice and a goal.
Okay.
You might not accomplish it, but you can work at it.
Strive for it. Yeah, I like that. That's a very good goal.
Well, I'm back in Galatians chapter 6. The heading is bear one another's burdens. But if you could take your mind off your own situation, other people's stuff seems more logically easy to achieve, like out there. I saw an older person lifting a large thing of cans, putting on the bottom of that cart. I thought, oh, put that on the top.
Yeah, so even bearing one another's burdens, to be outward focused on other individuals. Absolutely.
What did you say the verse was?
1 Corinthians 13, verse 4.
I have it.
Okay, go ahead.
Love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy, is not boastful, is not conceited.
Love is patient and kind. So we're aspiring to understand the love of God. We're aspiring to love God first, our neighbors as ourselves. And when we go through that, we're going to have to find out this idea of patience and really work along with it. There's a lot of different verses we're going to look at, but we're going to sit down in James chapter 5 for a little while today and bounce back and forth. But look at James chapter 5, verse 7. I've got that specific part of the verse up here. Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. Anytime you get one of those commands, it's like, do not be anxious. Oh, are you really telling me this? Like, all right, don't be anxious. Well, I'm already anxious about not being anxious. And then, and he says, be patient. Okay. All right. I know that's the goal. I know that's the challenge. I know it's a fruit of the Spirit. I know it's something that we're aspiring to, striving for. Be patient. Okay. How do I do this? That's where all my questions start flooding in. And he says, until the coming of the Lord. Now, this is something that we can take in from here, is that while we're here, we're waiting for Jesus to come back. Whether we die before he comes or we're waiting, whatever that may be, we're ready to go to heaven. And that tells me that you got to keep working and being patient until Jesus comes. That's an everyday, every moment, every decision of life, waiting and being patient. There's a lot of opportunities to take hold of there. There's a Psalm 37, that David is kind of struggling. He's looking at other people in the world and he's kind of assessing himself in seeing what they're doing and where he stands with God. And this passage in the middle of it, Psalm 37, starting in verse 7, says, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil. For the evildoer shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. Take a breath, calm down, and be patient. We get so caught up in looking at other people. We get so caught up in looking around us. That's what makes us anxious. That is what makes us impatient. But what David is driving us toward, and I think what James is saying as well, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. All these evildoers and stuff, they're going to have a day of judgment. We're all waiting for that day of judgment too. But refrain from anger and forsake wrath. The more impatient we get, the more that we start compounding other unhealthy emotions with it. The more impatient I get with somebody, the more angry I get at them. The more impatient that I get, the more anxious I get. So if we see ourselves kind of slipping down from the standard of patience, we see all these other things come flooding in. And that's why I like, Psalms like this that calls us to slow down and put a lot of weight and emphasis on God. In just a second, we're going to be talking about prayer and what does that potentially look like. Now to come back to the New Testament in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, Paul says, rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. A couple of takeaways that I see from this verse. Rejoice in hope. That's all right. So we know that we're waiting for Jesus' return. We know we're waiting for our reward, where we're going to be in heaven for all of eternity. Until we get there, until we obtain that hope, we got things to do. We got work we got to do. We got challenges in front of us. So be patient in tribulation. And for Paul to talk about tribulation, to be patient, and then to actually show us what that looks like, it's like, come on, Paul. And, he goes through his list in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. He said, I've been whipped, I've been stoned, I've been shipwrecked, I've had my clothes stolen from me, I've been hungry, I've been thirsty. He keeps going through this list. He's like, it's okay, we can get through this with God. Man, now my day looks a little easier, and he's the one that's saying we need to be patient. We need to be patient. And I know he's striving for it. And there's a lot of other verses that we can see along with those. But when he says that, he says, be patient in tribulation. I started thinking, well, the tribulations I'm going through today is that my waiter didn't bring my food fast enough. Is that real tribulation? No, that's not what's going on. It's not the same kind of persecution. It's a good little challenge in our day-to-day life, but on a grander scale, what are other things that we may go through as Christians that test our patience? Man, we live in a crooked and twisted generation, is what Paul says in Philippians chapter 2. And he says, we shine as lights. And we can get so impatient with people that don't know God yet, don't have any understanding of what the word says. I saw somebody, they had taken a picture of a sign that somebody had out, and it said, the Bible says money is the root of all evil, but yet Christian or churches ask for money every Sunday. And then they responded back to that, said, no, the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. It's that misunderstanding, and people take verses left and right and misquote them, try and show us in the wrong light. And I get impatient with that because I want to give an answer. I want to come back and say, hold on now, that's not what the verse says, and let's talk about this. You just have completely misunderstood. But they don't have any understanding about God. They need to be taught. They need to understand this loving and merciful Savior that we follow, to show patience toward those people that don't know God. And so I don't know, there's a lot of these, like I said, just a lot of different illustrations that may come to mind about this, but to be patient in tribulation, but to be constant in prayer. That's got to be our go-to as we're going through life, to stop and pray. So let's talk about this aspect of prayer when it comes to patience. Let's talk about praying for patience. So let's just, if we're going to condense down a single prayer, and we're going to make one statement to God, and we're going to say, God, give me patience. Right now. Yeah. Give me patience right now. So let's just stop and think about this one request, okay? I mean, you could probably tack on a lot of different things, but let's stop and think about this one statement that we may pray to God. Let's start working through it a little bit. What are we asking when we say this? What are we expecting? What comes to your mind if we make this prayer? What are we expecting God to do? What are we expecting our role to be?
Well, he's patient with us, so I don't know.
Okay. It's kind of challenging, right? So we pray that God help me to be patient. And then maybe in the back of our mind, we're thinking, well, I hope he doesn't have to teach me patience, because there's those scenarios that pop up where he's like, oh, you want to learn patience? I'll put you in a place where you can learn some patience, right? So maybe it's a little apprehension of, maybe I shouldn't say this because he may take everything away and give me sackcloth and ashes to walk around in. So what are we asking for exactly? I think it's interesting. Anytime we have a prayer where we ask God for a specific thing, like give me peace, give me whatever that may be, maybe some of these other fruits of the Spirit, I start asking other questions along with it. So what are we asking for? To say, God, give me patience. Am I asking for him to just give me this flood of emotion all of a sudden? It's like, I'm just really impatient right now. God, give me patience. Oh, okay, I feel better now. Is that what we're expecting? At times sometimes I would like that to happen. But usually what's going on? Why are we asking this? How do we expect God to help? So let's say that, I don't know, go back to any of those scenarios that we've been dealing with. You said you need patience. I need patience parenting. Okay, that's just right on me. So I'll talk about that. So I need patience in parenting. So what am I asking God for? To make my kid behave?
I think it makes, when you pray for it, makes you pause, unless we forget, but it makes you pause so that God can help you with that.
Okay, so maybe just to slow us down. I like that. Okay. So God, give me patience. I am trying to parent my kids and they're just running around, not listening to anything I say. So what am I going to do? God, make my kids behave? Am I going to expect him to do that? Let's see.
That's putting it on the problem, on the other person, basically.
Okay.
Children don't understand, but any other situation, it
Okay.
would be trying to change and not for you.
Yeah, so the person in front of me in traffic or in line that is, that I'm being impatient toward, Is it them or me that's the problem? Right. So then we go back to this prayer. It's like, so God, give me patience. I'm just trying to get out of here. I've got, I got to get home. I got to do this. That then falls on me. So now the prayer is like, okay, God, what am I expecting you to do here? I can't make you make the line go faster. And that's not what I'm going for. So now I got to be a little more focused. Let's add another aspect to it. Why are we asking for this? Are we, and we wouldn't say this, I'm trying to avoid personal responsibility. So if patience is my decision, something that I'm supposed to work on is a choice, am I wanting God to make those decisions for me? That gets difficult too, right? It's like, well, is he going to jump into every single one of the battles that we go through, or is he going to try and help us in different ways to see and figure out what's going on? I think the prayer of patience, or the prayer for patience, can be a challenging one if we just kind of throw it out there and not really think about what we can do, what we can expect, what God does, and kind of keep him in his nature and all these kind of things together. I think it becomes a very challenging prayer. Let's look at another verse, and then we'll come back to this, maybe reorganize it just a little bit that could be helpful. Back in James chapter 1, somebody read verses 2-4. James 1, 2-4.
Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing.
Come on, James. Like, this is second verse in the book that he's coming out. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. Of various kinds. Not just one that he's narrowing down on, but a lot of different ones. I love the book of James because it's so practical that it gets right in our face. It's almost like a commentary on the Sermon on the Mount. There's a lot of correlation between the two. And what James is telling us is to slow down. And to start off is like, all right, you got to be patient, and you got to count it all joy when you meet trials of various kinds. Then he's going to say, all right, because if we begin in faith and we start looking at the world with a Christian worldview, we start looking at the world through faith and then seeing everything around us, it's going to change our perspective. Now, he's got this laying out there, and it's a good challenge, but I'm going to add to it the next passage along with it, starting in verse 5. If any of you lacks wisdom, when we are being impatient, we're going through those things, I think to come back and say, God, I need wisdom on how to handle this. I'm just fed up with dealing with my family, whatever that may be. We're making holiday plans and trying to work with everybody, and so I'm impatient about this. Give me wisdom to be able to say the best things I need to. We start asking for wisdom. Now that looks a little different, right? So James says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he'll receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Think about something that's just tossed back and forth by the wind. I was talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was this weekend. It was Peter yesterday at lunch, and he was talking about down in Tennessee, we got all these cotton fields, and when they come through and they harvest them, and then you look at all the pieces of cotton that's left over on the side of the road, it looks like snow all down the side of the road. But I think that came to my mind yesterday as the wind was blowing, and thinking about some things just blown back and forth by the wind. That's not the kind of life we want to live, is it? Just letting whatever happens in life just blow us one way or the other, that we let other people, make decisions for us. And because if patience, falls on me and my responsibility, am I going to let other people, decide how I'm going to feel for the day? No, that's being driven back and forth by the wind. But when it comes to our faith, we're supposed to remain steadfast and immovable in our confidence in the Lord. And that's what wisdom helps us understand. If you read through the book of Proverbs, you're getting all of this information about how do you stand true, that you're not overcome by laziness or procrastination, you're not overcome by the love of money, or you're not being persuaded by evildoers, all this kind of stuff. It's helping you to remain stable so that whatever comes in life, you might have a little sway back and forth, but for the most part, you stay right where you need to be. That's what I think wisdom helps us to do in life. And if I say, God, give me wisdom as I'm going through these moments, because I feel like my patience is being tested, now I have other verses and have other things that start coming to mind, right? So All right, I'm being impatient with, training my kids. Well, I've got a responsibility as a dad to train that child in the way that they should go. So I need to be patient with myself as I'm trying to figure out, maybe I need to go talk to some other people. Hey, I've got this situation. I don't know what to do with my kid right now. I've got this thing going on, or, I got these people in front of me that are really challenging me right now. Well, have I even stopped just to talk to somebody in front of me? I've been so focused on myself. I'm here in line. Hey, how are you today? I just made a new friend potentially or something like that. Then my whole mindset is changed because I'm trying to show wisdom. I'm trying to show love, that it takes the focus off of me, like what you're talking about in Galatians chapter 6.
I worked at the store. This COVID thing, people are so nutty that occasionally, in the last 2 years, if I stop, just chat for like 10 seconds, it just seems to make me and that other party, they smile when we walk away from each other.
And then where we can change it, where we just start talking about something else. So I don't know, we're upset with our waiter or waitress that brought the wrong order or whatever. If I stopped and said, hey, we prayed before our meals, can I pray for you today? What are you going through? You may not, they may have had they might have been had a flat or something on the way over here. They were late, the boss got onto them, and so they're all anxious. I could just stop and say, hey, can I pray for you? That will help them slow down as well. So there's just opening up opportunities. And I think that if we're being patient, we'll start looking for things like this left and right around us. But to ask God for wisdom, and he will give it, to come to God's word and know what to do with it. So let's come back to our prayer. God, give me patience. If we reorganize those components just a little bit, what starts coming to mind? Why do I need patience? All right, because I've got a friend that is a non-believer that lives next to me, and I'm trying to get a Bible study with them, and I'm trying to study with them. They just won't have anything to do with Christianity. So I'm saying, God, give me patience with them. And I start my prayer that way. God, I've got a friend that I really would like to study your word with, and they just keep attacking Christianity or whatever, and I want to find an opportunity to be able to get to them. Give me wisdom to see that. Now, you're still saying, give me patience, but you're starting your prayer off with bringing the situation into perspective first. Then you start saying, how can God help? Now, this is in no way limiting him, because I love the times where God, we pray for certain things and he answers prayers in a way that we couldn't even expect, right? It's like, if I were to come up with the solutions in my life for how things should go, God finds a more creative way to get around all of those and show me, it's like, okay, well, I should have put my faith and trust in you. But I think we also have to know, all right, am I saying, God, just give me the feeling right now so I'm okay? Maybe that's not what I need to be praying for. That God, you know what? I've got my brother and sister, they're fighting, and they haven't talked to each other in 6 weeks. And the holidays are coming up, and it's going to be a mess when we're trying to come up with Thanksgiving plans. And I've got siblings that can't even sit at the same table together. So that's the situation. Now, God, help me. What do I do for them?
That sounds like Ann Landers when you say siblings can't sit next to each other without older siblings. No, not little kids.
Yeah, that gets real challenging.
That's why I'm thankful. My family, we all there's only 4 of us, but we get along. We got along real good.
No, because holidays can be stressful. I don't know. It's relevant because we're a month away from Thanksgiving, and you think about all the travels and people coming over, and we always make the comment that fish and family stink after 3 days. And it's like we have a certain amount of time that we can stay there with family, and then it's like, we all need to either go on a walk, to go on a drive, or we have only planned our holiday times for 3 days, and we'll come back another weekend. But then as we're praying, all right, so here's the situation. Here's what I'm needing, God. I'm putting this in your hands, and I know that you are a great God and you do so many great things that I'm not going to limit you. But then I want to walk away with some action items as I pray to God. God, this has caused me to stop, take a breather, tell you what's going on, asking for your help. And I know, I'm going to try and sit down with the Bible and find some verses that I can share with this person. Maybe I'm going to write them a card and talk to them. I know we start coming up with action items. Say, God, I'm going to go from here, but I'm also open for options from beyond this. But we've slowed down in our prayer and maybe it's changed our focus. So, we have those very quick prayers that we give to God, hey, help me in this moment. In Jesus' name, amen. It's the 911 call. But then the other times where, all right, I'm actually going to spend some time in prayer, where before you realize it, I've just been talking to God for 20 minutes trying to get understanding about a situation. I think that's what wisdom looks like. So as we go from here and just reorganize that prayer, let's go back to James chapter 5, and let's read James 5, pick up in verse 7 through 9. Somebody read this for us. Y'all go to 10:45 or 10:30?
Whenever you stop.
Whenever I stop. Okay.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. All right. Y'all said it. Okay. Somebody read this passage, James 5, 7 through 9.
See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door.
All right. So we just saw a verse a few slides ago where he says, be patient, waiting for the coming of the Lord. Then he gives us an illustration. What do we take away from his illustration he gives us here about patience? See how the farmer waits.
It takes time for some of our requests to be fulfilled.
Okay. So it takes time for things to come about. So with our prayers, let's wait and see, being patient, waiting on the Lord. Maybe bring in Psalm 37, thinking about that. What came to your mind?
Well, I think sometimes, well, I'll just use your example of a neighbor or whatever that you're trying to work with. Sometimes that may take the form of mowing a lawn, taking some cookies, doing various tangible things in order to create that bond, and then gradually introduce, because if someone's not ready to hear what you have to say, it's going to probably not only be invalid, but it'll rub them the wrong way, and they may kind of be adverse to that.
Yeah. So what is our responsibility when it comes to sowing the seed, right? So we sow the seed, and then what? We water it, and then we wait, because who gives the increase? God. As much as I want to go out there, my neighbor does an excellent job of making a garden, and he always asks us, he's like, hey, what do you want me to grow this year? So he did potatoes and lettuce for us, and it was so nice all through the summer. I just walked next door, picked myself a salad, got all the peppers and everything I needed, and walked back to my house. Potatoes, my kids got to go out there and dig in the ground and get potatoes, and we had them, every single week. There were tons of them that we could use. Anyways, he's really patient with his crops, because you have to be. You plant the seed and then you wait. But he also can see when things are not producing, and he'll walk away or just uproot them. And every time I look, he's got his tiller out, and he's like, you know what? Those late tomatoes didn't come in, so I pulled them all up, and now I'm doing, he put in more lettuce. He did late lettuce this time. And so you think about something growing out of the ground. As much as you want to go, it's like, okay, come on, when's the tomatoes going to be ready? And I'm going to reach down there, I'm going to pull the plant so it'll grow. That's not how things work, right? You have to be patient. We plant, we water, and we wait. And yeah, so with working with people, especially the ones that you're studying with that don't know about Christianity, you have to cultivate and prospect where this is going to go. We can do cold calls. I know some of you went door knocking, so you can go knock on a random stranger's door. You don't know what you're going to get, right? You don't know what their response may be. But if you start befriending them, bring them cookies first, and then create a friendship, then those doors are going to open. Physical doors, but also, the doors of their lives are going to open up as well. So yeah, that's a great takeaway from it. But you think about this farmer, he waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. As a farmer tills the ground, he works, puts all these things in there, puts the seed in, and then there's not much you can do beyond that. You nurture them, but we can water all of our plants and stuff, but you think about during this time, you got a farmer that's got this very large field. He can get a bucket, he can get something and go out and water all of them, but that's not really as practical. What does he have to do? He's got to wait on the rains to come. And this is what's interesting, is who provides the rains and the seasons? It's God. Now, we studied on Sunday morning in our lesson, when Paul talked with those people in Lystra in Acts chapter 14, when he's trying to guide them over to understand who God is, one of the witnesses and one of the things that he points them to, he says, look at who gave you rains during the seasons and took care of you and nurtured the earth. That was God. It was not all these cultivation gods and everything else around. It was the one true God. When I think about this illustration, all the prep work we may put in, all the sowing that we put in, but then you got to wait on the rains. You got to wait for the produce to come and things to come out of the ground. Wait patiently on the Lord to come back to Psalm chapter 37. So you also be patient. Now it's his second time after giving us illustration. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. We grumble. If you only believe what they did, or like we start saying things under breath, we start grumbling, and that's where we want the situation back in our own hands. We sit back and we wait and we're patient, see what comes from this. We start grumbling, thinking it needs to go faster, this needs to happen, or that needs to go on. Then we've just digressed again. We've gone back to ground zero. So I love this illustration. It's very profitable for us as we study through this topic. But then he continues on. James chapter 5, verses 10 through 11. Somebody keep reading here.
As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remained steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you have seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful.
All right, so before we talk about Job, we're going to spend some time on him too, but let's stop and think about the prophets for a second. So when you think about the prophets, who comes to your mind?
Jeremiah.
Isaiah.
All right, Jeremiah, Isaiah. Why do these characters come to our mind? Because they have some interesting stories about them, right? I love Elijah and Elisha and the dynamic that they have and how one comes in after the other. But if you think about these prophets and you start seeing how they would come to talk to the kings, we know Isaiah, you can read Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1, and see the kings that he was underneath. We can see Elijah working with Ahab. That's where you start learning patience. What was the little tagline? It's a little Bible trivia for you about Elijah. What was Ahab's little tagline for Elijah? What do you call him?
Troublesome person.
The troubler of Israel. Every time he comes knocking on the door, what are you going to say to me now? This is the guy that, Elijah prayed, all right, stop the rains. You're worshiping this God, this idol over here that's in control of the rain. So he prays and it ceases to rain for a number of years, just disproving that God first off. But knock on the door, Elijah comes in. What are you going to say now? Look, if you'll turn, if you will denounce your gods, then God's going to take care of you. He's the one that sends the rains.
Be careful what you ask for too.
Yep, there you go. That's what I'm saying. Be careful when you ask for patience. God may teach it to you. But I think about all these prophets. Every time they would come in front of a king, they had creative ways. Their object lessons are fascinating, how they would get the king's attention. Whether they were going to run around and act like a bull, or put chains around them and say, you're going to be led into exile. Jeremiah, going down to the potter's house, or burying his loincloth in the ground, things along these lines. This is all illustrations to get the king's attention. You had to be patient. These people were stubborn. And so in would walk the prophet, and they would teach them. And then they're going to have to walk away and wait for them to make the decision.
When Moses hit the rock with his staff, it had a little bit of anger.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That was a pretty expensive cost to him.
That's right. Doesn't get to go into
But
the
it was
promised
fixed
land.
though in the end. I mean, it works out okay in the end, but
Mhm.
still.
The patience that he had with the Israelites for 40 years in the wilderness, and then come to the Jordan River and not to be able to cross over in the promised
Well, he
land.
didn't go into the promise.
That's
he only
right.
got to see it.
Yep. All of these prophets, they give us a good example of patience because they show us how to, drop down in the middle of a society that's just not listening. If you think about Amos, it's the prophet that just shows us a lot of anger that, he comes in and he's talking to the kings. He's like, look, I'm not a prophet. I didn't go to prophet school. I'm not the son of a prophet. I'm a farmer. And God told me to come here to talk to you guys, and God's mad and I'm mad that I had to come up here to tell you guys, you need to get things straight. And then he goes back home and he waits. And you get Hosea on the other hand, and this feeling of deep emotion and love that, the things that Hosea goes through with his wife of prostitution and trying to bring her back. And God's like, that's how I feel about you guys, the Israelites, that I miss being with you and you have ran off on me. This is all examples of patience. And as James is talking about this, and you just think about the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord, sometimes they came in and they would, all right, this is the way that things are. Other times they would bear with them and help them and try and guide them, because God doesn't want anybody to perish. He wants all people to be saved. If we just start cutting people off and say, you know what, I'm not going to talk to you, I'm not going to talk to you, I'm not going to show you the word of God, I'm going to avoid your house. If we start, calling out things like that, we really learned the patience of the Lord and how to communicate the word of the Lord. But then you get to another example, the main one that comes to us. You've heard the steadfastness of Job, the patience of Job. What begins to come to your mind when you think about the patience of Job?
It wasn't something that he wanted. He wanted to get rid of something, which may make a difference in how you approach it.
Okay. What else comes to your mind when you think about Job?
Sores.
Sores. Mm-hmm. This is a man that made it a habit of every day going to offer sacrifices for his children, just in case he may have forgotten ones, and for them if they didn't do it. It's a man of dedication to the Lord. Now we see, Satan coming in, taking things away from him, and then him having to go back and he's talking to God, and all these things he remained blameless. It's one of the descriptions about him. He remained faithful to God. And those are like the first 2 chapters. And it's like, if you just stop reading there, but the story keeps going on. He gets all the wisdom from his friends. It's the same friends that sit down with him for a week and they don't say anything. It's like, that's a really good, grief counseling and things like that, just sitting there, and then they open their mouth. And you're like, opposite way, like, it'd been better had you not said anything. But all of his friends start coming to give him advice. But Job's waiting, and he's wanting to know. And what does God finally do? He says, Job, you've been asking a lot of questions. Sit down and be quiet and let me show you. I love that about the book of Job, that he makes Job sit down, close his mouth, and be patient. And he starts pointing out what things of the world that God is in control of, that he has made. He said, if I can take care of all of these things, you think I've forgotten you? And I love right there at the end of Job chapter 42, when Job finally speaks after God giving him the show and tell moment. He finally speaks. He said, I had heard of you with the hearing of my ears, but now my eyes see you. That's belief and faith, and God teaching patience to be able to look outside of yourself. Yes, things are bad. There's no minimizing what Job went through, but to look and see what God is all about and what he does. You think about steadfastness, you think about patience in the midst of this as well, this perseverance that he's got. But patience, we've got a lot to learn, right? A lot to take away from Job. You were going to make a comment?
Do you suppose that the 3 friends and Job's wife, do you think after things got fixed up and he's recouped everything, I wonder if these people grasp that?
I don't know about his friends.
New sons, new places to, sunny to eat and all that.
Yeah, I don't know about the friends, but the wife. I mean, it's child after child that they have more children, not replacing the other ones.
But he had
parent,
those
whatever
3
said.
friends, and they kept hounding him, kind of. I mean, they're sitting there with him, sort of enduring this suffering, but they're not really reinforcing him towards the Lord, though.
I wonder if Job had to sit down and show and tell with them as well, because that's all it would take, is to sit and say, hey, look what God showed me. Let me show you. I've heard of you with the hearing of the ears, but now my eyes see you, God. When we think about patience, we look to the prophets, we look to Job, and see the purpose of the Lord and how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. To come back, one of the prophets that I forgot about was Jonah. Jonah is a interesting character, right? About his lack of patience and understanding of the compassionate and merciful God. Because Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. Why?
He didn't think anything could be done for him. He just thought he gave up on him.
Well, he knew, if you go to Jonah chapter 4, starting in verse 1, he has a conversation with God, and he said, the reason why I didn't come is that if I were to preach to them and they turned, you would save them. He would rather have them dead than to turn to the Lord. That's misunderstanding the compassion and mercy of God, that he wrote them off and he said, I don't want them to come to know you. And that's how much he hated them as an enemy. And then we find the Assyrians coming in, taking over Israel a little bit later on. It was a threat to them and their livelihood. So we learn patience. We learn all these things to the midst of it. So as we pull in a different definition of patience, took this from one commentator, says the ability to take a great deal of punishment from evil people or circumstances without losing one's temper, without becoming irritated and angry, and without taking vengeance. It includes the capacity to bear pain or trials without complaint, the ability to forbear under severe provocation, and the self-control which keeps one from acting rashly, even though there is suffering, opposition, or adversity. Yeah, we have a lot to learn when it comes to patience. But I think if we'll take all these teachings that we've received from beginning of end of these illustrations and examples and people around us, we look to Job, we look to the prophets, we look to James, we look to Paul. There are people who have gone on before us that are saying these things, and they say, if you'll get in line with us, we'll show you, and we're working through this and we're learning. But it'll help us to change our prayers, where we will then depend on the Lord. The last takeaway, and then we'll be done for the day. As we think about Paul, we change our focus, change our mind about things. I think about Paul in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. The book of Philippians is all about joy and going through suffering and how to maintain that and looking to God. And there's so many great things just in that book of Philippians about joy. But when you get toward the end of it, really you could start in Philippians 4, verse 4 and work from there about depending on the Lord, trusting in him. But he gets to this verse that we're familiar with in verse 8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. We'll start focusing on the right kind of stuff. It'll slow us down, and we'll learn patience as we go through the midst of it. And the reason why I know that that is the case is what Paul says just a few verses down. A lot of times we want to jump to verse 13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Before you get there, though, you need to see Paul's perspective of thinking about the right kind of things and how it'll shift your focus as you go through what you can even plug in there, things that will test our patience. Paul says in Philippians 4, 11 through 13, not that I'm speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low. I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. When we struggle with patience and we set it as a goal, we need to start thinking about the world and our circumstances as God would have us to think. And then we'll look at whether we're being brought down or bounding, whatever stage we are in life, to put our hope and our confidence and faith in God and trust in him. And I think that we'll learn the right perspective on patience. So,
Sir,
yes, sir.
you could go the other way. You could be too over patient and maybe become complacent.
Sure.
And that could be just as bad as being aggressive.
On the other side, yeah, that could paralyze you from making decisions. I'm just going to keep waiting. Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point.